Emma pulled into the driveway of the sprawling suburban home in Maplewood, New Jersey, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of burnt orange and soft lavender. It was one of those crisp autumn evenings that whispered promises of change, the kind where leaves crunched underfoot like forgotten secrets. She sighed deeply, her shoulders aching from another long day at the graphic design firm downtown. The house, with its white picket fence and manicured lawn, looked picture perfect from the outside, a symbol of the American dream she'd chased into marriage with Mark. But inside, it often felt like an echo chamber of her growing loneliness. As she stepped through the front door, the warm aroma of garlic and herbs enveloped her, drawing her toward the kitchen. There stood Alexander, her father-in-law, sleeves rolled up on his crisp, button-down shirt, stirring a pot on the stove with the easy confidence of a man who'd built a life from scratch. At 52, he was still strikingly handsome, silver streaks threading through his dark hair, a jawline that spoke of quiet strength, and eyes the color of deep ocean waves that always seemed to see right through her pretense. "Welcome home, Emma," he said, his voice a low, soothing rumble that carried the faint trace of his Boston upbringing. He turned, holding out a glass of red wine, his smile warm and genuine. Their fingers brushed as she took it, a fleeting touch, skin against skin, that sent an unexpected shiver up her arm. It was innocent, or at least it should have been, but in that moment, her heart skipped a beat. Why did his presence always make the air feel thicker, charged with something unspoken? "Thanks, Alexander," she replied, forcing a smile as she sipped the wine. It was rich and velvety, much like the way he made her feel, comforted, yet oddly alive. Flashbacks flickered in her mind. Meeting Mark in college, Emma found solace in his company, a stark contrast to Mark's absences. One afternoon, as golden sunlight filtered through the oak leaves, he suggested a walk in the backyard garden, a sprawling oasis of blooming roses and winding paths that reminded her of lazy summers in her own Midwestern hometown. "Care to join me? The fresh air might do you good," he said, extending his hand with a gentle nod. She hesitated, then slipped her palm into his. His grip was firm yet tender, calluses from years of hands-on work in his now-sold construction business contrasting with her soft skin. As they strolled, their hands remained linked, for balance, over the uneven stone path. But Emma felt a warmth spread from her fingers to her chest. It was more than support, it was connection. Her pulse quickened. Why did this feel so right, yet so wrong? A light breeze rustled the leaves, carrying the scent of earth and flowers, and she caught him glancing at her, his eyes lingering a second too long. "You're quieter than usual today," he observed, his thumb absent-mindedly brushing the back of her hand in a small, circular motion that made her stomach flutter. "Everything okay with work? Or with Mark?" She bit her lip, the question stirring a mix of gratitude and guilt. "Just stressed, I guess. Mark's been gone so much. It gets lonely." The words hung in the air, vulnerable and raw. At the end of the path, near a blooming hydrangea bush, he pulled her into a hug, his arms enveloping her in a protective embrace. She rested her head against his chest, hearing the steady thump of his heart, feeling the rise and fall of his breath. It was comforting, paternal at first, but as the hug lingered, a subtle tension built. Her body molded against his, and she felt a forbidden spark, a rush of happiness tinged with something deeper, more electric. Pulling back, their eyes met, his filled with concern and an unspoken affection, hers wide with a mix of surprise and yearning. What was this feeling? A daughter-in-law shouldn't feel butterflies like this. The attraction escalated subtly, like a slow-burning flame. A few evenings later, Alexander suggested they escape the house for a bit. "How about that little cafe downtown? My treat. You deserve a break." It felt like a date, though neither would admit it. The cafe, nestled in the heart of Maplewood with its exposed brick walls and jazz music playing softly, was the kind of place where couples whispered secrets over lattes. They sat at a corner table by the window, steam rising from their mugs as rain began to patter against the glass. Alexander's gaze fixed on her as she spoke about her latest design project, his eyes tracing the curve of her lips with an intensity that made her cheeks flush. "You have such passion when you talk about your art," he said, his voice low and appreciative. "It's captivating." The word hung between them, laden with double meaning. On the walk back, the rain intensified, turning into a gentle downpour. Without a word, he shrugged off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders, his hands lingering on her arms as he pulled her close under its shelter. "Can't have you getting soaked," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. Huddled together, their bodies brushing with each step, Emma felt a thrill course through her, a mix of happiness and that nagging, caged desire. Back at the house, as they shook off the rain in the foyer, she tripped slightly on the welcome mat. Alexander caught her swiftly, his hands on her waist, steadying her. Their faces were inches apart, eyes locking in a gaze that spoke volumes, his stormy with restraint, hers shimmering with unspoken longing. Time seemed to stretch, the air thick with temptation. She could feel the heat of his body, the subtle scent of his cologne mingling with rain. Her lips parted slightly, imagining the brush of his, soft, inviting, but he pulled away with a soft chuckle, breaking the spell. "Careful there," he said, his voice husky. Inside, Emma's mind raced. This is wrong, he's family. But the thought only heightened the forbidden allure, a light jealousy stirring at the memory of his late wife, wondering if he'd ever looked at her this way. That night, as she lay in bed, the ache in her back from hunching over her computer all day flared up, a physical echo of her emotional turmoil. The next morning, over breakfast, she winced visibly. Alexander noticed immediately. "You look like you're in pain. Let me help. I've got some experience with massages, from when Sarah used to get those tension knots. Just a quick shoulder rub, nothing more." Emma hesitated, her heart pounding with a mix of nerves and anticipation. The idea of his hands on her, even innocently, sent a ripple of excitement through her. "Okay, if it's not too much trouble." He guided her to the living room couch, his touch light as he positioned her. As his fingers began to knead her shoulders, firm, rhythmic pressure easing the knots, she let out a soft sigh of relief, the room filled with a quiet intimacy, the only sounds their breathing and the distant hum of the refrigerator. "Tell me about your dreams, Emma," he said softly, his voice a caress in itself. "What do you really want out of life?" The question unlocked something in her, and as the tension melted away, so did her walls. She shared her fears of a loveless marriage, her craving for true connection. He listened, his hands pausing occasionally, thumbs tracing soothing patterns. In his mind, Alexander fought his own battle. Her vulnerability stirred a protective affection that bordered on something more profound, a temptation he knew he must resist. Yet, in this moment, the boundaries blurred, leaving them both on the edge of a deeper revelation. The morning after the shoulder rub, Emma woke to sunlight streaming through her bedroom curtains, casting a golden glow over the room like a soft embrace. She stretched, feeling the lingering ease in her muscles, but her mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Alexander's touch had been therapeutic, nothing more, or so she told herself. Yet, in the quiet hours of the night, she'd replayed the moment, the warmth of his hands, the way his fingers had traced her tension away, unlocking not just physical knots but emotional ones too. It was forbidden territory, this budding affection for her father-in-law, a man who represented stability and family in the classic American sense, strong, protective, with that quiet wisdom earned from years of building a life in the suburbs. But the thrill of it, the subtle, caged desire, made her heart race with a mix of guilt and exhilaration. Downstairs, the scent of fresh coffee pulled her into the kitchen. Alexander was there, as always, pouring 2 mugs with a practiced ease. He looked up, his eyes meeting hers with a new depth, an unspoken acknowledgement of the intimacy they'd shared the evening before. "Good morning," he said, his voice carrying a gentle timbre that resonated in her chest. He handed her the mug, their fingers brushing again, this time lingering just a fraction longer. The contact sent a spark through her, a forbidden flutter that made her cheeks warm. In his gaze, she saw a mirror of her own turmoil, concern laced with something deeper, more tender. "Thanks," she murmured, sipping the coffee as they sat at the breakfast nook overlooking the garden. The conversation flowed easily at first. Talk of the weather, the changing leaves signaling autumn's full arrival in New Jersey. But soon, it deepened. "That rub last night, it helped more than you know," she admitted, her voice soft. Alexander nodded, his expression softening. "I'm glad. You've been carrying too much on those shoulders." His words felt like a caress, stirring a happiness in her that bordered on dangerous. Inside, she wrestled with the thought, this is just family care, right? But the way his eyes lingered on her lips as she spoke told a different story. Eager to escape the growing tension at home, Alexander suggested a picnic in the nearby park. A slice of Americana with its rolling green lawns, families tossing frisbees, and the distant hum of a weekend farmer's market. "Let's get some fresh air," he said, packing a basket with sandwiches, fruit, and a blanket. Emma agreed, her heart pounding with anticipation. As they spread the blanket under a sprawling maple tree, its leaves a riot of red and gold, the atmosphere turned enchanting. They sat close, knees almost touching, sharing stories from their pasts. "Try this," he said, holding out a strawberry, his fingers brushing hers as she took it. The fruit was sweet, but the real sweetness was in the moment, the way their hands lingered, palms warm against each other. Emma felt a rush of happiness, a light jealousy flickering as he mentioned his late wife's love for picnics. Why couldn't her life with Mark hold this magic? As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows, he reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers in a gesture that felt both comforting and electric. "You deserve moments like this," he whispered, his thumb tracing slow circles on her skin, sending shivers up her arm. Their eyes locked, full of meaning, his stormy with restrained affection, hers wide with a thrilling nervousness. It was a handhold that spoke volumes, a silent admission of the attraction simmering beneath the surface. Back home that evening, the temptation escalated during an impromptu movie night. Emma chose a classic romance film, the kind with sweeping scores and heartfelt confessions that echoed her own inner chaos. They settled on the couch, a bowl of popcorn between them. But as the story unfolded, she found herself leaning into him, his arm draped casually over her shoulders, pulling her closer in what started as a paternal gesture. The room was dimly lit by the TV's glow, creating an intimate bubble where the outside world faded. His scent, clean soap mixed with a hint of wood from the garden, enveloped her, heightening her senses. Halfway through, during a tender scene on screen, Alexander turned to her, his face inches away. "You okay?" he asked softly. She nodded, but her breath caught as he leaned in, pressing a light kiss to her forehead. His lips were soft, warm against her skin, lingering just long enough to send a wave of emotion crashing over her. Rungdom, a deep thrill that made her pulse quicken. It was innocent, yet charged with forbidden energy. Pulling back, their eyes met again, his filled with a quiet conflict, hers shimmering with unspoken desire. In that moment, Emma's mind raced with caged thoughts. What if this kiss had landed elsewhere? The idea stirred a light guilt, a jealousy toward the boundaries they couldn't cross. The next day brought an accidental encounter that amplified the tension. In the narrow hallway upstairs, they bumped into each other, Emma carrying laundry, Alexander with a book in hand. Their bodies brushed, chests nearly touching, and time seemed to slow. She looked up, her lips parting in surprise, and for a heartbeat, she imagined the soft touch of his mouth on hers. His hand steadied her arm, the grip firm yet gentle, sending sparks through her. "Sorry," he murmured, but his voice was husky, eyes dark with the same internal struggle she felt. Alexander's thoughts mirrored hers. This attraction was wrong, a betrayal of family ties, yet it felt so profoundly right. A temptation he fought with every ounce of his honorable nature. Mark's phone call that afternoon shattered the illusion momentarily. His voice, distant and preoccupied, reminded Emma of her vows, stirring a fresh wave of guilt. "Miss you, babe. Home soon," he said, but the words felt hollow. Hanging up, she found Alexander in the living room, his expression concerned. "Everything all right?" he asked. She nodded, but the emotional shift was palpable, a reminder of the lines they treaded so carefully. As the days blurred, Emma's back pain returned, sharper this time, a physical manifestation of her inner conflict. Over dinner, a cozy meal of pasta and candlelight that felt suspiciously like a date, she winced again. Alexander set down his fork, his eyes full of empathy. "That shoulder rub helped before. Maybe something more thorough? I have some hot oil from Sarah's old spa kit. It's great for deep relaxation. Strictly therapeutic, of course." Emma's heart hammered, a mix of nervousness and hidden excitement bubbling up. The idea of his hands on her again, warmed oil gliding over her skin, was tantalizing, a step deeper into the forbidden. She hesitated, weighing the temptation against her principles, but the pull was too strong. "All right, if you think it'll help." They set up in the guest room, dimming the lights and lighting a few unscented candles for ambiance, the air thick with anticipation. As he warmed the oil between his palms, the scent of lavender filling the space, their gazes met. His steady but conflicted, hers fluttering with unspoken longing. The moment stretched, a cliffhanger of emotions, as she lay down, ready for the touch that promised relief and so much more. The guest room was a sanctuary of soft shadows and flickering candlelight, the air heavy with the scent of warm lavender oil. Emma lay face down on the makeshift massage table, a soft towel draped over her back for modesty, her heart pounding with a cocktail of nerves and anticipation. The room felt intimate, almost sacred, as Alexander stood beside her, rubbing the hot oil between his palms. His hands, strong yet gentle, began to glide over her shoulders through the towel, the warmth seeping into her skin, unraveling the knots of stress and something deeper, a yearning she'd fought to suppress. Every touch was deliberate, professional in intent, but the atmosphere crackled with unspoken desire. "Relax," Alexander murmured, his voice a low, soothing hum that resonated through her. His fingers worked in slow, rhythmic circles, easing the tension in her neck, then tracing down her arms. The heat of the oil mirrored the heat in her chest, a forbidden fire that flickered with each careful press of his hands. Emma closed her eyes, a soft sigh escaping her lips, her body surrendering to the relief while her mind wrestled with the thrill. His touch felt like a conversation, each movement asking questions neither dared voice aloud. She imagined turning to meet his gaze, the air between them electric with possibility. Alexander, too, felt the weight of the moment. His hands paused briefly, thumbs resting lightly on her shoulder blades, and he caught himself staring at the curve of her neck, the way her dark hair spilled over the towel like ink on canvas. She was his daughter-in-law, a boundary etched in stone, yet the tenderness he felt was anything but familial. Guilt gnawed at him, but so did a longing he'd buried since his wife's passing, a desire to feel alive again, to connect. He pushed the thought aside, focusing on the task, but the intimacy of the moment was undeniable. "Feeling better?" he asked, breaking the silence. His voice was steady, but Emma heard the undercurrent of restraint. She turned her head slightly, meeting his eyes. They were stormy, filled with a mix of care and conflict, mirroring her own. "Much better," she whispered, her lips curving into a small smile that made his breath catch. The candlelight danced across her face, highlighting the softness of her features, and for a heartbeat, Alexander imagined what it would be like to lean closer, to let their lips brush in a fleeting, forbidden moment. Instead, he moved to her arms, his fingers grazing her wrists, entwining briefly with hers in a gesture that felt like a shared secret. The touch sent a shiver through her, a rush of happiness tinged with guilt. She turned onto her side, facing him, the towel shifting slightly but still preserving modesty. Their eyes locked, the air thick with unspoken words. "Alexander," she began, her voice trembling. What we're doing, it feels..." She trailed off, unable to name the emotion. "Rungdon." a deep stirring of the heart that was both exhilarating and terrifying. He sat beside her, his hand resting on hers, warm and grounding. "I know," he said softly, his gaze never leaving hers. "It's complicated, isn't it?" The admission hung between them, raw and honest. In a moment of vulnerability, Emma sat up, the towel clutched to her chest, and leaned into him. His arms wrapped around her in a deep hug, her head resting against his shoulder. The embrace was tender, comforting, but it carried an undercurrent of longing. Her breath hitched as his cheek grazed hers, the faint stubble sending a thrill through her. Then, impulsively, she pressed a soft kiss to his cheek, her lips lingering near the corner of his mouth. A chomke that felt electric, full of unspoken promises. Alexander froze, his heart racing. He returned the gesture, a gentle kiss on her forehead, then another dangerously close to her lips. Their breaths mingled, eyes locked in a gaze so intense it felt like a confession. "Emma," he whispered, his voice husky with emotion. "We can't. We shouldn't." But his hand tightened on hers, betraying the desire he fought to contain. She nodded, tears pricking her eyes, not from sadness but from the overwhelming weight of their connection. "I know," she said, her voice barely audible, "but I feel so much when I'm with you." The confession broke the dam. They sat there, hands entwined, sharing a moment of raw honesty. "I've been alone for so long," Alexander admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "And you make me feel things I thought were gone forever." Emma's heart ached at his words, a light jealousy flaring for the life he'd shared with his late wife, a love she craved in her own marriage. But the guilt was stronger, a reminder of Mark, of family, of boundaries. Yet, in that moment, the temptation was overwhelming, a caged desire that begged to be set free. Their lips met, a soft, tentative kiss, brief, electric, and achingly restrained. It was a single moment of surrender, lips brushing with a tenderness that spoke of love rather than lust. They pulled back, eyes wide with the weight of what they'd done. "I'm sorry," Emma whispered, tears spilling over. Alexander shook his head, his thumb brushing away her tears. "Don't be." We stopped. We stopped in time. His voice was firm, but his eyes were soft, filled with a love that transcended the physical. The moment shifted, the air clearing like the sky after a storm. They stood, still holding hands, and moved to the garden outside, the autumn air cool against their flushed skin. Under the stars, they sat on a bench, the silence between them now peaceful rather than charged. "We care about each other," Alexander said, his voice steady, "but we have to honor what family means. Mark, this house, our roles, we can't break that trust." Emma nodded, a bittersweet calm settling over her. "I know, but I'm glad we have this understanding. It makes me feel less alone." The resolution was quiet, a gentle acceptance of their bond as something deeper than romance, but purer for its restraint. Emma reflected inwardly. Love wasn't just passion, it was choosing respect, choosing family, even when the heart pulled elsewhere. The lessons sank deep, a reminder that true connection could exist without crossing lines, that vulnerability could lead to peace rather than chaos. As they embraced one last time, a long, comforting hug under the starlit sky, Emma felt a sense of closure. Their connection would remain, a quiet, unspoken love that strengthened them both without shattering the family they cherished. The garden, with its blooming roses and whispering leaves, seemed to approve, cradling their moment in the heart of an American autumn.